the beach was a place where they found peace, and coming here to the beach and being here was just such a good thing for him to get away from Tallahassee, and so they always were down here, and he had this kayak, and he would go out in the Gulf of Mexico, and he just thought this was so funny, and he would come back and he'd be like, and there'd be people all over the beach, and he'd be like, "Is this America?"
Yeah.
And like people would just die, oh, he's so funny.
He's not really playing a character, but Larry David's show, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Okay, that is Steve Uhlfelder.
We'd go to San Francisco, we'd be at the Golden Gate Bridge, and he'd ask people, "Do you know how we can get to the Golden Gate Bridge?" And how many people would actually take him seriously?
And growing up, do you remember he would go through the drive-thru? We would never get McDonald's. I mean, we were that was the biggest treat. So he would go through backwards.
Yeah, I do that now. The kids love it.
Oh, you do? Great.
Yeah, we drive through
I
backwards.
don't. But he would go through backwards, reverse.
It's fine. It
through.
really throws him off.
He called me up and he said, "Hey, I want you to think about coming to work with me." And he goes, "And why don't you take a few days and think about it and talk to some people about it." So he called me back like 2 hours later. Not a few days, 2 hours later. And then he called me back 2 hours after that, and then the next day and the next day. Of course, I have some of the same traits that he does. So I had already been on the phone talking to people. And so I was told it's either going to be the best thing you ever did or the worst thing you ever did. That was the advice I was given that I remember most clearly.
I can remember that one day he emailed me 60 times. I counted them to see at the end of the day how many responses I had made. But it was because he was so passionate, he would keep coming up with these great ideas, right? So, well, we've got to get this company on board. And what about this person as a spokesperson? And when's our next meeting?
Yeah, if we were on, typically when we had meetings with our case manager, they were virtual because she was in another county, and Steve would not back down. If he had to ask a question or get a service in place for our son, he would just keep asking and be the squeaky wheel until it happened.
He has an edge to him. He's super bright, and he really ruminates things. Things sink in with Steve. He has very high standards. He's a deep thinker, and he carries it with him. He doesn't let go. That's just a character trait that for the full 50 years that I've been with him, you don't push Steve to the side. He hangs in there big time.
I think, especially in the fields that Steve's worked in over the years, there's a lot of people who are doing things for their own benefit. And it's obvious, right? Steve is one of those people who has integrity, and when he believes something is right, he doesn't mind getting people together around the idea, and he doesn't waver on it. If something's the right thing to do, you do it, regardless of what political ideology you have, what party wants it done. You do it because it's the right thing.
I mean, Steve has been involved in, he helped start and get Governor Bush to fund a mentoring initiative, for high school students in disadvantaged situations. He personally was a mentor to students in Leon County for 30 years.
And when the hurricanes in 2004 hit, Hurricane Charlie was the first, and then it was like bang, bang, bang. We got hit all over the state. And again, Steve worked with Governor Bush to say, let's start a hurricane relief fund. And they pulled me in to, of course, be the executive director and work with them. And Steve and some other folks were chairman and served on the board. But that, again, was Steve's idea. And every time people are down for the count and he sees that something's going to be terrifically horrible. I don't even know how else to say it, because I know he reacted the same way after the BP oil spill. He was immediately like, what are we doing? How are we going to help people?
I just remember my parents saying, doing nothing is just, when something bad's going down, it's just as bad as doing nothing. I mean, if you just sit on the sidelines watching something really horrible or going to be horrible, is just as bad as participating.
So it's not just a talking thing with him. It's a hands-on, every day, something that he does. He does a whole lot more of this than I've ever done. That kind of shames a lot of us that, we write a check, or occasionally show up somewhere. Steve not only gives money and brain power to something, he actually goes and does the work himself. So.
And I think that what people really need to know is that this is not a man looking for attention. This is not a man looking for something to do. This is a man that is out there doing it because his heart drives him to do it. And he's doing it all for the goodness of everybody else. And it's what really keeps him going. I mean, because he wants to do for other people all the time. That's what he does. And he doesn't do for himself. And so, ever. I mean, he is the most unselfish person I've ever met in my entire life. Most unselfish person.
Well, Steve started this. I don't know if you know that, but this was Steve's brainchild. Yes, I mean that's why Steve's being honored here. You'd have to find out the number of years ago, but you know the history. Steve's family perished in the Holocaust at Theresienstadt, and Steve began, I would call it 15 years ago. Barbara would certainly know exactly the date, and Steve would. But this initiative to put into law that we would have a curriculum and teach students about the Holocaust.
Yeah, Barbara Goldstein's, Steve Uhlfelder's family, my family, all were persecuted. My parents were my mother's from Berlin and my father was from Vienna. They met in Shanghai. I was born in China. A lot of people don't know that. But, Steve's parents went through hell too. And so tonight in this crowd, Barbara Goldstein, Steve Uhlfelder, and Andy Reese all were affected by the Holocaust. And so this is a fitting tribute.
While he is very funny and he has a great sense of humor, he's also very intentional about the stuff he does care about, which is, of course, everything that we're here for dinner about tonight, which is Holocaust education, Holocaust remembrance, and, of course, making sure we never forget.
And I hope those that came tonight will consider staying involved, because that's what Steve does when he joins something. He stays with it and he makes things happen. And so to the extent that people can do that in their hearts, somehow help in some way, whether it's, through prayers or through giving money on an annual basis, I don't think Steve would do it for any other reason other than he's very passionate about this cause and he wants people to pay attention to it, not let this Holocaust go unremembered, but to make sure you're willing to talk about it and tell those stories after the last person has died.